now we're looking at aquaculture KPI metrics with other livestock. So let's see what we're doing. Let's talk about why we want to align. Provides focus for activities and programs. It amplifies the impacts across indicators. So an indicator of greenhouse gas, global warming potential, or water use, if we understand them across all the different ag sectors, then we can start to see why it matters. Creates a common language, a method of understanding across sectors. Very important for NIAA, which has this sort of omnibus representation. Expands opportunities for engagement of stakeholders, enables sharing of improvement technologies within sectors, and sometimes across sectors. Sustainability programs are usually what drives this. And those sustainability programs don't generally come from the producers. They usually come from the marketplace where someone says, thou shalt. If you're going to sell to me, if I'm going to buy your product, you will have this done. Now, there are a couple of, I've divided the whole continuum of those into 3 categories to give us context for comparisons, because there are certain things I don't do, and I don't think we should, that are sort of outside the wheelhouse of a body like this. There are threshold compliance frameworks where you have compliance criteria established by some authority, regulatory, market access, etc. Organic, GAP, those are regulatory compliance frameworks. Participants subject to audits for compliance and either pass or fail the criteria. That's a framework, threshold compliance framework. Sort of like a regulation. That really is in the same vein as regulation. Incremental compliance frameworks are really what we all went through when we got on our airplane. Are you silver, platinum, gold, concierge? So that American Airlines ran out of precious metals, so they started adding French words to what we are. I used to board first, now I board third, and nothing's changed about my status. So incremental compliance frameworks are we have compliance criteria for tiers of performance established by an authority. That's usually an NGO or some market segment. Participants achieve a ranked certification based on audited performance, some 3 stars, whatever, and then there's continuous improvement. And that's the area I work in, and that's the area I'm advocating across all of U.S. agriculture. This is the approach that we're almost all using. It's continuous improvement framework for sustainability. So if we have something we want to make better, and if 0 is bad and 100 is good, and we want to make it better, a compliance framework really looks like this. Minimum acceptable performance level. Now they're very important when you have starting out with nothing. This is where regulations kick in. When you got nothing else, this sets the floor. The minimum acceptable performance level. Now, you do certifications. What kind of certifications do you do?
Best aquaculture practice, organic, USDA organic.
Oh, those are all either ors, right? You either comply or you don't.
Right.
So right, that's what I understood. And organic is the one that's most familiar to folks. So the threshold certification says, all right, there's your first tier performance, and that could be the basic. That would be like GAP or some other. But maybe you're better than that. And so you can move improvement through this system. So 30% of your performer, or 50% of your producers are first tier, 30% are second tier, and maybe 20% are third tier. Now, why would you want to be third tier in a system like this? Why do you want to have 3 stars versus, or gold versus silver versus bronze? Why do you care?
Because Whole Foods does.
Maybe Whole Foods pays you more for third, or maybe you have to be here before they'll buy your stuff. What Whole Foods did is they started out first tier, then they moved them all up to second tier, and now they're at a third tier. And a lot of people who started their whole performance system to produce for Whole Foods don't have a market anymore. Whole Foods won't buy it, and they're selling at a wholesale market now. That's the challenge you have there if you've got a market that evolves past your production system. This is happening around the world with these sorts of tiered systems too.
Yeah, BAP is a 4-star system.
So BAP has a progressive system too, so this will be more like that. So what continuous improvement is quite different. It says, all right, where are we now? Let's benchmark this thing. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? Let's set goals, and let's get better over time. Let's get better as a community. Now, you can get better as a producer, too, but really this is to drive the whole community to get better, not to drive individual producers to get better. The whole community gets better by individual producers getting better, but you assess the whole community, and you make the whole system better. This is really designed for regional to national market communications. It's not global necessarily, though we're actually starting to see this emerge as a beef production strategy with the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, so for beef producers. Now the idea here is to move the curve. So if we look at soybean erosion in the United States in 2010, these are real data, 2010 soybean erosion, and this is a probability distribution curve. Basically, This is where most of, this is the central mode of the 0.131 tons of soil eroded per bushel in 2010 as the national average. That's a lot of erosion. But still, most producers are back over here. Most producers. And over 10% of them are much less than that. But the area under this curve is about 80% of the producers. But you have this 20% of the producers that erode higher than that, and some of them way higher, and that's what drives this out. The tail of this curve really drives the metric. And so if you want to move the curve, what do? You start with the highest eroding fields. And I spent 25 years of my life modeling watersheds to figure out where those highest eroding fields are and to implement best management practices at those highest eroding fields. Because if you focus there and you move the curve, then you reduce for everybody and you tell the story. You benchmark. And this is what soybeans is doing now. They've established a set of goals based upon this sort of moving the curve. So they're going to reduce erosion across the entire U.S. soybean sector. And they're getting access to European markets because of this. So that's moving the curve. Where did I get this concept? This came from Jason Clay of the World Wildlife Fund. This is a conservation organization articulating what we've been doing in extension and ag research for 100 years. Articulating it very well to the conservation organization too, that you move the curve by starting where the problems are, not by rewarding the best. Now the 3 gold stars up here aren't going to move the curve. That's the challenge we have. So we developed the ANSIASABE standard for continuous improvement, which is now an ANSI standard, which is define, plan, and implement, define sustainability for the enterprise, identify sustainability indicators, select the metrics for those indicators. This is what we did 2 years ago in Indianapolis. This was just a draft standard then. Now it was published last July. So this is a national standard. It will be an ISO standard in 2 years, international standard. You benchmark those sustainability performance indicators, set goals, develop a strategy to meet the goals, implement the strategy, measure, assess, and if it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, change it. Do something different. That's our approach. This requires a whole sector level collaboration. This is not one farm versus another. This is not farmer versus farmer. This is all farmers working to make their whole programs better. Setting goals. This is the process. We went through this process of goal setting in Indianapolis, where we said, as a community, we set vision goals, aspirational and strategic goals. Aspirational goals, we'll go that way. We'll make this, we'll reduce this, we'll improve that. We'll reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we'll improve profitability, we'll improve efficiency. Strategic goals have dates and times associated with them. Tactical and operational goals below this dashed line are not stakeholder collaboratives. They're management decisions. And some of them are proprietary. And they don't have to be transparent to be effective as long as you're moving your strategic goals. What we have problems with many programs, like GAP, in fact, is that they sometimes will tell us how to produce. They dictate tactical and operational goals. You've seen this with sustainability protocols, global sustainability protocols, where they tell you what you're supposed to do at the production level in order to be sustainable. Our argument is, no, the producer knows best how to do this. As long as we achieve our strategic goals together, how we get there, as long as it's legal and ethical, is none of your damn business. That's a farmer phrase that we all hear a lot. So that's why we developed this process. So as we go through this definition, our indicators are outcomes-based, but they're almost always implemented at practice level, because you can't implement an outcome. You drive an outcome through a practice. They're science-driven, they're technology-neutral, which means we don't say which technologies are winners or losers. Other sectors of society do that. If it's legal and ethical, it's allowable. And that applies to GMO soybeans. That applies to GMO salmonids. And then transparency. People have to trust what we're doing. The only way to do that is that they know. Identify the most important indicators. We've done that. Important to producers and their customers. Select indicators that have established metrics. Develop experience with assessing and reporting. So you go through the first round. That's what we're doing with beef, and it's painful. They're really ahead of everybody else now. Create a process that works for everyone. When the first phase of indicators are done, established, then identify the second phase. You're never done with this. This is continuous, because you're never sustainable. You're always becoming more sustainable. When do you know you're not sustainable? When you go out of business. Our goal is not to go out of business. This is just good business practice. This message resonates in the boardroom. It resonates in the farmhouse kitchen. It resonates across all of our society. This is not some liberal tree hugger agenda. This is good business. It's good risk management. So let's take a look at what we already reviewed, the top priorities for where we are. We're going to back up. We're going to focus again on sustainability of feed, water quality, efficiency, resource uses. Really, environmental regulations are outside the role of metrics and indicators. Risk of disease, I think we could do something there, but it's a little bit outside the role. Some of these other issues like efficiency and affordability, they plug in, everything's connected. But we're going to focus on those environmental issues to begin with, because that's usually what the drivers are for processes. So if we look at this supply chain for animal ag, crop production, animal production, processing, food, retail, consumer, we see this whether you're dealing with beef, we're dealing with dairy, pork, aquaculture, same sort of steps in the supply chain. You may have environmental issues, sustainability indicators that transcend the whole thing. Environmental things we want to make better, water resources, greenhouse gas emissions, to social and economic. We have this with aquaculture. We have this across all of our other production systems. But one of the challenges we have is some of the metrics, environmental sustainability metrics, the things that we measure may only deal with a couple of these sectors, crop production and animal production for stream water quality habitat, for example. Stream water for habitat. Water quality may go on to animal production or processing. So we have to define where in the supply chain we're dealing with these issues. You don't have to have a metric that addresses the entire supply chain. In fact, at this level, I think the producer sector really, and maybe upstream the crop production, is really the best place to start. So just to point out that not every metric applies across the entire supply chain. So what we're doing with beef is we're identifying within each sector what is already being measured, what can be measured, and what should be measured for each of those indicators that they care about. This is the inventory of what we know. Common measurements across the sectors will be classified as system metrics, and we have some of those. Metrics that are unique to the sector will be classified as sector metrics. Almost all of our metrics in beef are sector metrics. We prioritize system and sector metrics for benchmarking. So if we look at sustainability of feed sources, first of all, these are the groups that are working now utilizing NIAA as this group, utilizing this framework right now. Pork, cotton, field to market, which we'll talk about as row crops, peanuts, soybeans for export, soybeans for US rice, beef, poultry, corn. We're working with all of these groups. Field to market, the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture focuses on defining, measuring, and advancing sustainability of food, fiber, and fuel production. It's row crops. It's a multi-sector stakeholder initiative that has over now 250 members. This is just a smattering of them, from conservation organizations to universities to the biotech industry to producer groups. Their environmental KPIs are greenhouse gas, energy use, water use, land use, water quality, nutrient use efficiency, and habitat biodiversity, which they're using an index for. We report these with this sort of a field print calculator, or sort of field print approach, so that you can see across these indicators how we're doing over time. And so benchmark 5-year averages 80 to 84, 87 to 91, 97 to 2001, which we indexed everything at 2000, which is the green one. The green indicator on those axes is 1.0. So things that are smaller than that or less than 1, larger than that, larger than 1. And then 2007 to 11, we just finished the 2016 report, which will come out in about a month. So we'll have another ring inside here. And what we're seeing is over time, we're getting better across all these metrics with soybeans. That's the value of this, a simple communication tool to show that we're shrinking the field print. Now, what we'll show next year with soybeans is actually soil erosion went up. So our soil erosion for next year, whatever color we're using, purple, will go over this. Soil erosion went up last year. Conservation tillage practices, we used less of them. We had a drought. We had some other production problems. Soil erosion went up. What we did with soybeans, though, is we used an indexed year, 2010 data, to evaluate change over time. I worked with soybeans to develop this process, and we set goals. Land use, reduction, 10% reduction in land use, which is efficiency. Soil erosion, 25% reduction by 2025, using the 2000 benchmark data as the starting point. Energy use and greenhouse gas emissions above 10%. So soybeans set goals, and they're working on achieving those goals. Others are beef, pork, and poultry. So let's take a look at beef. Again, a multi-stakeholder initiative, the U.S. Roundtable. Identified the 6 most important indicators, selected those indicators, and then moved forward. Same process. So what we've done is we started out with the same thing we did in Indianapolis. We start out with what are our most important things, the sticky note exercise. We then did a materiality matrix Everyone put the things they care about from each of the sectors onto the boards to figure out what they cared about. And we started out with 160 issues we cared about on the sticky notes. We dropped this into 13 issues here, and we reduced it down to 7 priority issues.
How long did that take?
I'm sorry?
How long did that take?
A year.
A year.
A year. 9 meetings a year. So the group, we did it in 2 days with this group in Indianapolis. It took that group a year. The reason it took them a year is because we had the entire supply chain in the room, and we had overall over 150 participants, and there was very little dialogue between many of the groups, the producer sectors and the NGO sectors to begin with. So we spent 2 to 3 meetings just getting to a common understanding of what words meant. That we use the words that mean the same things. So we were talking.
And we were fish farmers, so we eat more fish, so we have a better brain.
They have omega-3s are better.
Compared to
Just efficiency all around.
It's overall, no. But what we accomplished in Indianapolis was profound. It was a lot of work in a very short amount of time, and it was contentious. We had arguments. It was not easy, and it was 2 sweaty days. It was hard work, and we were all exhausted by the end of it. But that's what we had to do in order to get there. Oscar Wilde said the reason socialism failed, it took too many weekday evenings. This self-governance thing is hard. It takes weekday evenings. It takes talking to people you don't agree with and trying to figure out where your common ground is. It's hard. So here are our indicators for beef: animal health and well-being, water resources, land resources, air and greenhouse gas emissions, worker safety, and well-being. Those are our high priority indicators for beef. So now what we're doing is, again, we're going through our inventory of what's being measured. That's the key. Inventorying what is being measured. And what our framework is, then we have U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef has an indicator working group, a sustainability solutions working group, and they're working to do these things: do segment-specific metrics, develop a metric tool, resources, education, and training programs. This looks like an extension program to me, and that's exactly what it is. It's linking them together. Then self-assessment tools. So USRSB is going to develop all of this. Anything below this dash line, the verification working group will do, but it's business-to-business supply chain stuff. Yes?
For the education and training component, who is the audience?
Producers predominantly, and anyone in the supply chain who's engaged in improving their metrics. It can be processors. We're going to be developing toolkits and education training for restaurants, for McDonald's, for Arby's, for others, of what they can do within their own facilities for water reuse and water resource efficiency, water use efficiency, and other things. So they'll share within their own sector what they've experienced. One simple example: flush-free urinals. Used to be a big argument that you could save a lot of water by using flush-free urinals. Ladies, you probably aren't so experienced with them as the guys are. I can tell you, flush-free urinals are a disaster. They don't work, and they clog your plumbing. Just saying. So, just about wrapping this up.
So, Mark,
Yes.
the beef guys went all the way down the supply chain, right?
Yes. All the entire supply chain. Walmart in the room. What a pain that is. From feed producers in the room.
Okay.
Field and market in the room all the way. So feed producers, forage producers, alfalfa growers, all the way to retailers.
So in our case, with the fish, if there's nirvana, we would eventually have to reloop those guys back through.
And you know why that's valuable for you? They'll buy more of your products because they know more of what you're doing. And they can maybe help you with finance, and maybe they can help you with because you get a contract for production. So when they're in the room with you, they're in the game with you. And now you give them a story to tell to their customers.
And some of them are already part of the beef guys or the pork guys anyway, so they're conditioned.
Cargill is very interested in this. I can assure you, Cargill, if they're not here yet, they're very interested in this. Yes?
So what's in it for me? Like what would make them want to be in the room?
Access to high quality proteins that they can sell, or high value proteins they can make money on. Really, it's profitability. That's it. You're giving them a business proposition that makes sense to them. Most of them already understand the business proposition for U.S. produced aquaculture products, seafood and fish. They understand the business proposition. They don't have an understanding of what you're doing to make them more sustainable and how you can tell the story that U.S. raised catfish, salmon, or shrimp doesn't have the environmental impacts that the Asian race does. And I'm not really big on geopolitical competitiveness, saying those guys are bad and we're good. But I do think that the empirical data, the evidence are clear. The reason they can do it so cheaply is because they take a lot of shortcuts on the environment. Not all of them. Some of them are top scale, global, best. Some of those Vietnam producers are the best in the world. Better than any of ours. Sorry, guys. Some of them are because they're highly capitalized. They have a lot of finance, a lot of money. But some aren't. And you really can't tell them apart because they come over in one big frozen batch. Right? So there's no premium for it. And ultimately, I can tell you what that means when you commoditize things is it drives to the bottom. Because now you have pennies on the kilogram profit, and it drives production practices down.
Just as an example, we talk about the big guys at the table. I've had meetings with the executives from Giant Eagle,
Right.
and we were talking about like freshwater shrimp and stuff like that. And they are willing to do backflips to get that product in their stores,
Right.
you know, and stuff like that. They'll slash their profit margins.
Because it drives customers.
They'll advertise for you. They'll coming soon. You know, if it's a seasonal type of application or something like that. So they're not all about making a bunch of money right off the bat. Now, and they'll help grow the industry and so on and so forth, which will in turn drive the cost down.
Right.
And they understand that.
And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that kind of finance or that kind of partnership because that kind of partnership allows your producers to have more resiliency. They can get more finance. They can grow if they want to. They can expand if they need to. Otherwise, you're just up against that annualized marketing process problem, and you're always at the whim of your buyer. And it's really difficult. That's why diversification is the rule for successful folks now. So, National Pork Board. These are our indicators for National Pork Board. A lot more than we worked with them for 3 years to get to this point. It was one of the first animal proteins we worked with to get to indicators. It took us 3 years to get this level of indicators. But you can see they're very familiar, right? They have a PQA plus, which is the same as your Best Aquaculture Practices program. We care ethical principles for animal welfare. You see commonality across the indicators. If we look at pork life cycle assessment, we did the same sort of assessment for pork that we did with you guys. We asked where's the CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas impact coming from. And we look across all of the framing of things that, again, pork's simpler than aquaculture because you basically have one kind of production practice predominantly. The sow barn, finished barn, processing, packaging, retail, and consumption. Consumption is actually pretty high because you got to cook that stuff. Every kilogram has to be cooked, and so that puts a lot of fuel load on. And then there's refrigeration as well, and then there's waste. There's a lot of waste. But really, it's the manure and the feed that drives everything in pork for greenhouse gases. Manure and feed. So if you want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in pork, do everything you can do to increase feed conversion efficiency. That means ractopamine is a sustainability production practice. I don't care if you like it or not. If you take it away, you decrease feed conversion by 12% or thereabouts. And if you're going to do that, you're going to make the production system less efficient. This is a way we can actually, the pork industry can have a conversation about sustainability and production practice choices to move it out of the hands of the advocacy groups from NGOs who say you should grow pork like the way we did in 1820. Everyone had their pigs on the farm and everyone got trichinosis. And it's just, there's the other problem with mortality, piglet mortality, use of we analyze the impact of the use of antimicrobials, and we showed the use of, we'll get to that in a minute. So again, digging into where the CO2 comes from with live animals, it's piglets, it's feed, and it's manure. Piglets are largely from mortality. We looked at water. All the water is mostly coming from feed, 75%, 25% on the farm. Stuff that's on the farm, 83% of that's drinking water. You can't reduce that. So our systems are pretty efficient there. If you want to increase efficiency, go upstream. Now, we looked at production practices. This is the value of this method. Anesthesia, the use of anesthesia for castration, ractopamine, immunocastration, growth-promoting use of antimicrobials, preventative use of antimicrobials, Lammer's pins, McLone plants, entire males. And their water consumption. You want to increase water consumption, take preventative antimicrobials out of this picture and you'll increase water consumption dramatically. You'll do the same with greenhouse gas production. It's the same. It looks exactly the same for greenhouse gas. We were analyzing removing these from the system and the impact these have on the system. Some of them do not have an impact on water resources. If they're in this gray line, they really have an impact. Immunocastration isn't going to change water use that much enough to matter. Ractopamine does because it increases growth. Take ractopamine out, you'll increase water use, you'll increase greenhouse gas emissions. You'll decrease efficiency of production. So our argument, same with cage-free eggs. We're analyzing the same thing. You want your cage-free eggs? That's great. You just decrease the sustainability of egg production by a measurable amount, sometimes somewhere around the 20 to 25% amount, and you've also increased your probability of getting a microbial infection from those eggs in the double digits, based upon the evidence we have. Cage-free eggs are fantastic if you've got yard birds. They're not so good for a whole supply chain production practice. It's nonsense emerging as policy. It's people who've never had a chicken in their life or raised a chicken in their life telling chicken producers how they should produce. It's U.S. Humane Society doing their thing, which is basically PETA wrapped up in a legitimate organization because they took it over, and then driving agenda. And their agenda is no animal products in the supply chain. That's their agenda. They're not your friends. They'll never be your friends. Don't sit at the table with them. They'll poison your food.
And blame you for it.
And they'll blame you for it. That's exactly right. They're poisoning our eggs right now. So, we're looking at poultry. People are, in my neck of the woods, the environmentalists hate poultry producers because they've destroyed the world, right? This is what a 1957 broiler looked like. This is what they want us to go back to. I've raised those birds, and I've cleaned those birds. This is what a broiler looks like 10 years ago. They're even bigger than that now, at the same age. Our efficiency metrics for broilers are just, we're making these things more efficient and therefore more sustainable. There are impacts that we have to manage, and we need to manage them more explicitly. I'm going to wrap this up. So our next step is to develop, we've got the KPIs now. We need to develop metrics for them. We need to benchmark those. We've got a good start on that process. Then we need to set goals for improvement, and we need to implement those goals. Thank you.